G'day friends and foes, Arjay here with Arjay's This Is Not Legal Advice, or TINLA for short. And this is episode 61. So in this episode, I'm going to just do an intro to a candidate forum that was a little while ago. And I do have the full thing up. With the filming, I didn't have anyone to actually film for me, so the first part is audio only, but then I ended up putting a video on and just wedging it between like a orange juice bottle and some glasses, something like that. So I have cut down the full thing because the full thing covers basically the Gold Coast electorates for at least central and southern Gold Coast. So with this particular one, it will have myself and Nelson Quinn, myself as Reset Parliament, and Nelson Quinn, who is a Greens candidate, and basically the incumbent also JP Longbroke. And as I say, if it's Longbroke, fix it, or upgrade it. But he was unavailable. Sorry, I'm getting a bit tongue-tied. And yeah, so it has myself and Nelson Quinn at the start doing our 2-minute pieces each, and then there were some follow-up questions, and then it has basically a representative from 6 different parties. So it's got myself as Reset Parliament, One Nation, the Greens, there's a party like Legalise Marijuana Party or Legalise Cannabis Queensland, some name like that. The Liberal Party, or LNP it is in Queensland, so the Liberals and the Nationals have merged, and also Labor. So I hope you enjoy this video, and please like, share, subscribe, donate some money if you like. You can donate at paypal.me/RJ Martin. So that's ARJAYMARTIN. And you can also donate specifically to the COVID lockdown legality case. If you go onto gofundme.com.au and type in COVID-19 space 84 court case or something like that, it should pop up. Facebook doesn't like me posting a link magically. And what do you think of the new haircut? Woo! Long gone are the curls for now, but it's growing back. Anyway, cheerio, have a lovely day, bye. Woo!
Can I have our present candidates for Surfers Paradise? We've got Nelson Quinn and Arjay Martin. Nelson is from the Greens and Arjay is from Reset Parliament. So we'll start off with Arjay from Reset Parliament.
G'day everyone. So my name's Arjay Martin. I have recently completed a Juris Doctor law degree at Bond University, and basically I would have already been practicing law if it wasn't for this illegal, unlawful and irrational COVID lockdown. I know that's a big statement, yet it is backed up by law. The lockdown itself has destroyed the economy in Queensland, in Australia and elsewhere. It is actually prohibited by section 69, 117 and 92 of the Constitution. It has not even been legally gazetted in Queensland. So the COVID directions have no force of law in Queensland. That's as per the Statutory Instruments Act. We are living in a society where no one in Parliament is standing up against these illegal lockdowns. And sure, there was a big panic back in January, February, March, April, that this disease would be such a terrible disease and wipe out a quarter of the population, all that kind of thing. Yet that has proven false. We also have the likes of Dr. Jeanette Young, who has banned the use of hydroxychloroquine based on a flawed study where there was a gentleman and he mixed up hydroxychloroquine with hydroxyquinoline, which the MP Craig Kelly did an excellent speech on recently. Basically, we have the incumbent, Mr. Longbroke, has been in the Parliament for 16 years. Surely all of his worthy, useful, helpful suggestions and ideas have been utilised by now. And if it's Longbroke, why not fix it? Also, we have had 31, like it was 31 years ago when we had the Fitzgerald inquiry, and isn't 31 years too long to flush away the corruption down the toilet? Thank you.
Thank you, Arjay. And Nelson Quinn from the Greens, please.
Thank you. I grew up on a farm in Queensland, which has now been in our family for more than 100 years. My association with the Gold Coast goes back to the 1960s. Probably gives me some kind of age record here. We've been living here permanently now for the last 6 years. I have worked for many years on legal, environmental and heritage matters with national, state and local governments, international organisations and community groups. I was 20 years a farmer. Now I'm a part-time researcher at Griffith University with a PhD in environmental law. The COVID crisis has exposed the problems that our governments have failed to cope with. Examples abound. For example, homelessness, domestic violence, overdependence on tourism and hospitality, precarious employment. There's also a personal element, as some of my family here have a couple of small businesses in the food services industry. We now have an unparalleled and unexpected opportunity to start building a better future. We need to be focusing on industries that protect our environment and protect our way of life against threats like climate change. Our planning processes here seem to please hardly anybody. Just look at the debates about Main Beach. So what we need to do is build for the future with better planning, sustainable industries, fairer society and community well-being. We have to fight for these things. We must help our most vulnerable people as much as we can. We must build on the skills and knowledge that abound in this city, among our enterprising people and our fine universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelson. And can we thank the candidates here today for the seat of Service Paradise. Thank you. I should also remind us that the sitting member, John Paul Langbrook, gives his apologies. He's had other duties this morning, but he would have liked to have been here. So what we're on to now is the representatives of the various parties are going to be asked to speak on statewide issues. We're going to do this in 2 batches so that we comply with the COVID-19 regulations. And first up, we're going to have Megan Scanlon from the ALP, Ros Bates from the LNP, and Sharon Sewell from One Nation. If you could make your way to the stage, please. So each of these party representatives will have about 3 minutes, a little bit longer than the previous representations, to tell us why their party is the one that should lead the state. And I'd like to start off with Ros from LNP, please.
Sure. Thanks very much, Dean. Firstly, let me say that Queensland started 2020 off with the highest unemployment rate in the nation, with the lowest business confidence in the nation, and the most bankruptcies in the nation. Anastasia Palaszczuk was the last Premier to introduce a business stimulus, and she was the first Premier to stop having a budget, and in fact, the only Premier who didn't go ahead with a budget. So what that means is that Labor and the Government of Queensland is flying blind in our biggest economic crisis. Make no mistake, Queensland was in trouble well before COVID-19. The only plan that Anastasia Palaszczuk currently has is to keep the borders closed until Christmas. People and businesses need certainty. We need to know exactly what the government's plan is, and we will not see a budget under this government. Unlike the LNP, who has already announced our congestion busting plans here on the Gold Coast for a second M1, we have announced a Department of Grunt so that the Coordinator General's failed projects, which have been stalled under this government, will actually get moving. We have a big, bold plan for the Bradfield scheme. We have seen the Palaszczuk government copy a lot of the LNP's policies. We had said that we would air condition every state school in Queensland. That was copied. We said we would build a second M1, and we will have shovels in the ground. And we said the Labor government pinched that proposal as well. Now, after a Labor government who has not built one dam in Queensland, except to decide to pull down the Paradise Dam, and we all remember what happened the last time Labor tried to build a dam. It was called the Mary River. Ask the people in Gympie. The LNP does have a plan. We have plans to get infrastructure going. We, on top of what has already been funded under the current government, we will have an additional $1 billion worth of congestion busting, business growing projects across Queensland. We've also said that we will not introduce any new taxes. Under the Labor government, in the last 5 years, there have been 9 new or increased taxes. We've seen land tax go up twice. We've seen payroll tax go up. We have a waste levy. We have, as I said, the worst unemployment in the nation with no plan from the Labor government. Deb Freckington and the LNP team have plans to get our state moving again. And certainly here on the Gold Coast, we will make sure that we look after the businesses and that we do care about those people who've gone bust on the border thanks to Palaszczuk.
Thank you, guys. Could I ask Megan Scander to represent the ALP?
Thanks, Dean. Look, it's an honour to be here on behalf of the Palaszczuk government today, and many of you will know that the Premier held very firm on making sure that health was a priority in this state, and that's allowed us to open up more as a result of those strong measures. And it's why we are able to have this event here today, unlike many areas like Victoria and overseas. And I know some people would criticise some of those measures, and I know it's been difficult, but because of those measures, we've been able to kickstart our economy again and start developing and implementing our economic recovery plan, which I'll go into in a moment. But I just wanted to touch on a couple of points made by the member for Mudgeeraba in relation to the track record we have here on the Gold Coast. Under the Newman government, they held every single seat here on the Gold Coast and didn't deliver a single dollar for the M1. Also, didn't contribute to the light rail. We still have conflicting positions on the light rail from the LNP. The member for Burleigh wants it to dog leg, which would essentially mean the heavy rail is redundant. We have a very clear plan around infrastructure. We have the runs on the board. We've delivered the first stage of those M1 upgrades, and we're delivering the next ones. And we've also delivered stage 1 and 2 of the light rail. We're doing stage 3 right now, and we'll take it all the way down to Coolangatta as well. But in terms of our health response, we have to make sure that we're continuing to employ frontline service workers. We've always been a government around restoring those critical frontline health emergency workers, and we've employed more doctors, more nurses, and more frontline public health officials in this state than under the LNP, which has allowed us to do that important public health contact tracing. But in terms of business, I really wanted to talk about the things that probably matter to all of you, and I know it's been a difficult time. We've implemented a range of measures from payroll tax relief. We've provided Q-Rider loans to the sum here on the Gold Coast of 1,100 Gold Coast businesses have received up to $250,000, totalling $14 million just on the Gold Coast in those loans. We've also provided 1,600 small businesses just on the Gold Coast with grants of up to $10,000, totalling $14 million. We provide $500 electricity rebates to businesses so that they can keep the lights on. We've accelerated roadworks like the ones I've just talked about, but also some local roads as well, like the Tooluna Street intersection and also Maudslin Beaudesert Nerang Road. We have provided the Gold Coast City Council with funding to accelerate construction works, $8 million to get small local projects moving, $100 million to get more public housing, a big issue in this city. We need to provide more public housing, and we have the runs on the board when it comes to delivering over 300 public housing homes for vulnerable people within this community. And we're also working with industry. We've provided those industry support loans to our theme parks, who are big employers here on the Gold Coast, a new entryway at the Gold Coast Airport. There's a range of initiatives that I could go on about, but we have the runs on the board, and at the end of the day, this election will be who you trust, who has delivered for this city and who hasn't in everlasting government.
The Gold Coast than ever before. We are the party that keep the other two in line. All the candidates for One Nation are grassroots representatives all over the state that have true care for their community. They're not career politicians. Most of them have lived in their community for a very long time, and they're not there to climb the ladder either. They're there for the community. There's going to be 70 of us all together for the state, and I think it is time for us to make a difference. One of our major policies is the Bradfield scheme, which is being copied by the other parties now too, which One Nation have been behind for over 20 years. This is getting all the rain that happens up in North Queensland down to the farms in the other parts of Queensland that have droughts. And the same, like we will build dams to help with the farmers as well in the drought-stricken areas. Other policies that One Nation are truly passionate about is education, bringing back proper English and maths into the schools, and having our children properly educated. I have an 8-year-old son where I have seen what really goes on in the schools and all the other agendas that go in the schools, where it really should be about our maths and reading and writing. Other policies are the law and order. We have really strong policies for law and order and youth justice as well. There's just not enough people being held accountable for the crimes that they do. So One Nation have a lot of policies behind that for giving the police and the judges more availability to be able to do their jobs. And most of us candidates are small business owners or farmers. We're the real people of Australia, and we will have shovel-ready projects ready for small business. And we want to stop fear for the Australian people. We want people to want to be prosperous and not stop living in fear. And I do feel that is what One Nation and the candidates will bring to the state. And it really is time to make a difference and get the other parties held accountable by not just having the two major parties out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ask you to hang about for a second. We've got time for a couple of questions or a question I'd like to put to each of you. Liz, Ros, in terms of the LNP's position on the border and the border closure, can you enlighten us, please?
Certainly. We've always said that the decision on the border should not be set and forget. It should always be based on health grounds, and yes, the LNP called for the borders to be open because that's what people on the southern Gold Coast were crying out for, but that was well before Victoria and Labor completely messed up the hotel quarantine down there in Victoria. In fact, it was Deb Frecklington who called for the border to be closed to Victorians before the Premier. So we will always work on the health advice, and obviously the concern at the moment with the outbreak at the detention centre is that there could be a genomic link to the girls who came from Melbourne, the handbag girls, and that will be a concern. But a bigger concern, of course, is if they cannot find the source of that infection. So we will always want to protect the health of Queenslanders. In fact, the LNP's got a strong record on health in Queensland under Lawrence Springborg, and certainly we want to keep Queenslanders safe, but we don't want to see everyone go bust in the meantime.
Thank you. Megan, yeah, it's going to be a close election. Well, it comes from a close start. So Parliament's very close as we see it right now. If you're the only sitting ALP member in the Gold Coast region amongst our state electorates, if the ALP wins Gold Coast, it's likely to continue and stay in government. What other seats on the Gold Coast do you realistically see being part of a Palaszczuk government if you head that way?
Look, many of you may remember back in the day when we did actually hold multiple seats here on the Gold Coast under the BD government, and we were able to deliver a lot in that time. You look at some of the infrastructure like the Gold Coast University Hospital, Metricon Stadium, there's a whole lot of road upgrades that occurred during that time. It's, you know, any election is difficult, and I don't think anyone should take their seat for granted, and everyone should be working hard in the best interest of their community. I think that the Gold Coast will be a key battleground at this election. Because you know, there's a lot at stake, and there are families in the northern Gold Coast particularly who want jobs, who work particularly in the construction sector, who want to see infrastructure projects fast-tracked so they can stay in employment. And I was actually talking to the Gold Coast Bulletin editor the other day about the fact that if you look at the small business numbers, the largest industry of small business is in the construction sector. So it's really critical that we're supporting those people during this period. So I think the Northern Gold Coast is a key battleground. We've invested significantly in the growth there with new ambulance stations. We're building a new police station, fire station, 3 new train stations on the Gold Coast, all of those exits, 41 and 49, the M1 upgrades. There's a significant piece of work, and I think if people were voting on who is actually delivered, there would be a significant number of people voting for the ALP. But we can't take it for granted, and we've got to work hard, and we've got some phenomenal candidates. And the Southern Gold Coast is also a key battleground as well. You know, Hayley Camprad and Rabbit, both very much locals who understand that Southern Gold Coast area, and it's been a tough time for them. I think we all acknowledge it's been a tough time for those border communities, and we've certainly tried to make some of those measures a bit easier for those locals who do need to travel to and from. But again, at the end of the day, it is our government who is delivering the M1 upgrades for Southern Gold Coasters. It's our government that's putting the money on the table to try and increase public transport in that Southern Gold Coast area and preserving that heavy rail connection for future development as well.
Thank you. And Sharon, what role can we expect to see the likes of Pauline Hanson or Mark Latham play on the Gold Coast in this election?
Well, Mark Latham's New South Wales. He's head of the New South Wales One Nation Party, so that's where where he needs to put his efforts. Pauline Hanson is in the federal for Queensland for the Senate. We've also got Malcolm Roberts as well. So both Pauline and Malcolm do live in Queensland, and they do. They're there for us every day, and we can ask them questions. Malcolm Roberts is actually coming to the Gold Coast soon to meet all the people and businesses, and Pauline does come as well. So they're all federal, so they and that they live close by, so they are a voice there, and I can always call them if I need them.
All right, well, thank you for our candidates for that representation of your various parties. Please give a round of applause to Megan Scanlon from LNP and Sharon Stewart from the Nation. Thank you. Next up, if we can have Nelson Quinn from the Greens, Deb Lynch from Legalise Cannabis Queensland Party, and Arjay Martin from Reset Parliament. Again, we'll have 3 minutes from each candidate to tell us what their party represents at a state level. Thank you, candidates. Deb, we might kick off with you for you can tell us what Legalise Cannabis Queensland means at a state level.
Well, to begin with, we don't believe that any one party should be leading the state. We need a broad crossbench to accurately represent our diverse community, and we don't want to be dictated to by party policies interfering with the action which is not in the best interest of the people. Legalise Cannabis Queensland want to, if any of us are elected, we'll introduce community forums and interaction so we can get feedback from our constituents, because that's who we're supposed to be representing. instead of there being a flurry of activity and backslapping and backstabbing between the parties representing their policies. This is not in the best interest of the public. It's in the best interest of the party and their sponsors. Not one of the other parties supports full legalisation. Every one of them wants a pharmaceutical model, and that is never going to work with a cannabis-based medicine. It cannot be standardised because it has so many different strains and varieties, and each one of those has to be personally tailored to the patient. So a standardised product is never going to be successful, and we're going to have this battle for years to come. The Beattie government was mentioned earlier. Peter Beattie actually campaigned when he was elected to legalise cannabis, and that he was going to legalise 1 kilo for each person in this state. After he was elected, he backtracked and he said, oh no, sorry, I've only just realised how much that is, and we're going to have to talk about it. Well, we're still waiting 20 or however many years later. Hemp can help with the recovery of the state. It can produce jobs in a variety of areas, from farming to manufacture of fabrics and textiles and retail. The construction industry could be using hemp-based hempcrete, which is carbon, not only carbon neutral, but it actually reduces the amount of carbon as time goes by. The stress on our health system could be impacted by more people being able to use cannabis medicine and not having to use the health systems or be a burden on the health systems quite so much. And crimes and policing. Victimless crimes are taking up the majority of the policing budget. People who are actual victims of domestic violence, assaults, robberies, all of those sorts of things, they're being kept on the back burner while the police budget is being wasted on soft targets. Tourism, if we only need to look overseas to see how cannabis has improved the tourism overseas, and the sky hasn't fallen in. We need to look at a carbon-based society which is sustainable and clean rather than a hydrocarbon-based society. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. And Arjay, we have a representation from Reset Parliament.
Yeah, thank you. So I am the founder of Reset Parliament. We are intending on running in every single seat in Queensland, although we've been severely hampered with, some of you may have read in the Gold Coast Bulletin about me trying to launch my political party with Surfers Paradise Police illegally, unlawfully prohibiting that. There has been subsequent court action where I'm fighting for each one of you to get rid of these illegal, unlawful COVID directions, border lockdowns, etc. We do have the likes of Professor Barodi, who is an Australian doctor, that states that there is a safe, cheap, effective medication to get rid of COVID disease. And that is ivermectin. You also have, as I said, hydroxychloroquine, which has been banned against all common sense. Reset Parliament is different from other political parties in that we don't have a binding of members or candidates. So basically the candidates are there to represent each electorate and the people of those electorates. That's why I'm here, to find out from you. If you'd like to speak to me afterwards, I'm more than happy to do that, or you can go to resetparliament.com, which is still under construction, but it has some information there. So another issue we have in Queensland is a lack of representation and community input into decision making. We should have citizen-initiated referenda, and back in 1917 there was a referendum to eliminate or remove the upper house of Parliament. People voted no to that. Yet in 1922 the Labor government actually just installed more members in the upper house and abolished the upper house. which is arguably unlawful, illegal, due to the defining nature of the Westminster system being that you have two chambers of parliament. So I can waffle on about, there's plans for mandatory vaccines, including by the Prime Minister, or as mandatory as possible. And then he tried to go back on his word when there was the backlash about that. So again, mandatory medications are prohibited by Section 51, subsection 23A of the Constitution, that the governments, and this applies to all levels of government, can provide dental and medical services without compulsion, or as it calls it in the Constitution, civil conscription. We also have a lot of problems associated with the healthcare field, including such things as the contamination of vaccines by stealth-adapted zoonotic viruses, which I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard about, but basically there are viruses in vaccines that have then gone into people and then subsequently into the blood supply, and some are sexually transmitted, such as simian virus 40 and simian cytomegalovirus. And my time's up, but thank you all.
Thank you. And last representing the Greens, we have Nelson Quinn.
Thank you. You can rely on the Greens Party and the people we already have in Parliament, and we hope to have many more, to continue to pursue environmental protection policies wherever they can. That's particularly important for the Gold Coast, it seems to many of us. Several speakers today have talked about the benefits of the natural environment we have here for our own way of life and to support the tourism industry. It's also one of the most biodiverse places in Queensland, indeed in the whole planet, so it's worth saving for that reason alone. You can also rely on the Greens to continue to support policies and programs of a social justice character that help our more vulnerable people in our society to get a better life, help more disadvantaged people to lose their disadvantage, close the many gaps that people keep exposing. You've heard today that, from several speakers again, that the state's falling behind in health and education matters and other things, infrastructure and the like. We wholeheartedly agree with that because the figures show that. So I'll just mention some policies here that the specific initiatives the Greens are putting forward for this election that deal with some of those things. So I get it right, I'll read a bit. The health, we want to build more public health facilities, hire more doctors and nurses and so on, to bring us up to more or less the same standard as Germany. That's a good comparison because we're one of the richest countries in the world, so is Germany, similar in many ways. There's been a big falling behind in housing in Queensland, particularly what we call social housing. We want to see many, many more of those built and also improve tenants' rights when we do, so that people again have a safer space where they live. We want to invest money in the school system to bring it up to scratch. It's well behind now, as people already said to you today. Electricity's already been mentioned. The figures we've got, the studies we've seen suggest that if we reverse a lot of the privatisation that's gone on in recent years in the electricity world, we'll not only generate lots of jobs, but be able to slash electricity bills by about 46% over time. We would work towards better use of the solar systems, better solar feed-in tariffs, more cooperative generation capacity arrangements where neighbourhoods get together and build their own systems and so on. My colleague Scott's already mentioned the public pharmaceutical company to do research and bring down the price of lots of drugs. We also think that we can start to establish more manufacturing industries in Queensland based around our basic natural resources. For example, solar industries up around Townsville, wind machinery and so on around Rockhampton, lots of wind there, lots of sun in Townsville, and we're quite happy to adopt the ideas of the Grattan Institute about establishing green steel industry in Gladstone or thereabouts. Now all of those things would require some public investment. There's nothing new in Australia about public investment in new industries that are going to benefit the whole country.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Candidates, hang about for a moment. If I just ask each of you a question, we'll stick with you, Nelson. Can you tell us what the Greens policy around the border closure is?
The Greens tend to support easily the idea of health number one. So you have to, we all have to put up with decisions or whatever, or systems that do that. The specifics of it are kind of interesting. People say we should just have one national system and so on and all that. The reality is that the situation is different all across the country. If we didn't have the state borders, we would have had to invent some borders for this purpose. We easily understand the difficulties of people who live around the border area, and what needs to be done there always, and I'm not suggesting it's not now, is individual situations have to be worked through. You know, in other words, you have to start with a kind of more or less a blanket approach, and you soon get word about where that causes difficulties or whatever, then you just have to keep working on that. The other thing that's been highlighted by a couple of recent events is the need for consistency in the administration of it. And that also gets to the point that when you run down your public services and so on, it becomes much harder to do that. You've got too few people trying to do too much, and perhaps too many people out there ready to criticise rather than understand and help them do it better.
Thank you. And Deb, in Tasmania there are commercial, industrial and medicinal hemp farms. Is that part of the legalised cannabis Queensland vision, or is it more associated with individual use?
No, sorry. We would like to see that the ag and sugarcane industry in North Queensland could easily start to adopt introducing hemp into their growing practices, and that would give them more than one crop a year. And some crops, there could be multiple crops. You could have a seed crop, and you could also have the waste crop afterwards, which could be used for things like making into hemp-based methanol and running power stations. Now, any power station throughout the country that is presently run on either diesel or LPG gas can easily be retrofitted. It only needs new seals to be able to start to run on hemp methanol. And that would be cleaner, sustainable. It would introduce a jobs platform into the area, because you would have to grow the hemp, you would have to process the hemp in order to run the power stations. So it would be a boon to the local areas as well.
Thank you. And Arjay, if Reset Parliament has candidates in all or many electorates for the October election, it could well be that you have a significant impact on tightly contested seats. So which parties would you preference in that case?
So I believe that people should make their own preferences. That's the way it should be. With voters, a lot of people have misconceptions about how to vote. It doesn't really help that you have different systems federally and council elections and state elections. But everyone is responsible for their own preferences. Whereas a problem with big parties in particular, being the two that form government for the last 100 years basically, is that if party A comes up with a great idea that's good for the majority of people, then someone from party B has to poo-poo that idea just because we didn't think of it. That is ultimately to the destruction, and it's bad for everyone. The same also applies if party A has a really terrible idea, and then all of their party members must support that ridiculous idea just because we have to win, we have to save face, etc. So basically, as I said, the Reset Parliament Party is the only party that is actively, I'm taking the COVID directions to court. There is ivermectin that can clear COVID disease in 48 hours according to Professor Barodi, etc. We also have both parties, as in major parties as well as minor parties that are parliamentary representing, that they aren't standing up for everyone. If you drive down the road and you don't see a sign that says 60 kilometres an hour, you get pulled over, then you say, well, I didn't see the sign, I didn't know it was illegal, then the police don't care. Yet the government itself is doing illegal actions and getting away with it, and no one in Parliament is standing up for the people against the illegal actions. We also just had a recent decision in the New Zealand High Court where they determined and made a judgment saying that the first 9 days of the New Zealand lockdown was completely illegal. So it's not just me saying things. I am, as I said, legally qualified. I'm not yet a lawyer, but I'm standing up for everyone. And Reset Parliament also intends to do that and to represent the people themselves. So it's not really a matter of giving preferences or supporting some other party or whatever. There is a slim possibility, even though it's unrealistic, with the Stockholm syndrome that people have, and that is where people, they notice that people that get kidnapped sometimes adore their kidnappers. Yep, no worries. And the lockdown.
Yeah.
Don't want it to be like Melbourne.
Stockholm syndrome just take us in a different direction altogether. So, we take your point on the preferences. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to the three candidates here today representing their parties: Nelson Quinn from the Greens, Deb Lynch from Legalise Cannabis, and Arjay Martin from Reset Parliament. Thank you. So folks, we'll take a short break now. Enjoy the company around the table, have a good chat, and I'll be with you again shortly to close out the morning. Thank you.